Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to be talking about the HiFiMAN Susvara headphones. It's part of our headphone series, and I hope you enjoy it. The HiFiMAN Susvara, in the view of a number of reviewers, is in the top handful, and some reviewers think it is at the top of the top handful of headphones currently on the market circa 2023. They've been around for a few years, so a number of people have gotten to test them. A number of companies have taken a shot at coming up with something that's better, and they've kind of withstood the test of time. So they make a good reference headphone for us. You might be interested in them per se, but also it's kind of nice to know, especially for headphones at a lower price point. These, by the way, are in the US, $6,000, so it's not an inexpensive headphone. You might want to know, if you were shopping at a lower price point, what's the level of approximation of the sound you can get at, a steeper price. Okay, so I think this provides a very nice reference. I have a lot of experience with HiFiMAN headphones. They do a very nice job, so I was pretty confident going in that these would at least be okay. I'll talk in a minute about sound quality. First of all, just to go over the setup here, this is a typical plug-in design that requires an amplifier. This is a planar magnetic headphone, which is a little bit different way of making sound than you have in typical, especially under $1,000 headphones. In these headphones, you've got a sheet of mylar or plastic, and that thin sheet of plastic, which is quite large, you can kind of see the size of the diaphragm here. That sheet of plastic has electrical wire, if you want to call it that, electrical traces bonded to it, and then there's an array of magnets hung outside of where the diaphragm is. And when you pass an electrical signal, the musical signal, through that wire, a wire in a magnetic field will move when it's stimulated by an electrical current, and that movement causes the diaphragm to move back and forth. The wire wants to go either closer to the magnet or farther away from the magnet, and that's what makes the sound. Typically, you'd have a speaker driver with a voice coil at the center of it in a magnetic field, so it's still electromagnetic, but it's pushing the driver diaphragm. Instead of pushing it all over, as in a planar magnetic, it's pushing it at the center. I like to say you can't really reason from technology to sound quality very easily, especially if you're not an experienced engineer. But anyway, you should know it's a different and in some ways theoretically advantaged principle that the Susvaras use to make sound. Also, since physical things matter with headphones, this has a nice soft leather. It's a Alcantara kind of thing that suspends the headphone on your head. That evens out the distribution of pressure. I found that worked very well. I also like that the clamping force on your head is it's enough that it doesn't feel like it wants to slip off, and it's light enough that it's quite comfortable. HiFiMAN had the good thought, in my view, to make the inner side of the cup be cloth. It breathes a little and you don't tend to get sweaty right there. That's quite nice. Nonetheless, anytime your ears are inside of a little space like this, they'll warm up, and I don't know, depending on how sensitive you are to that, you might want to stop every 5 or 10 songs and let your whole mental apparatus, including your ears, breathe. Anyway, I thought they were comfortable. I thought they fit nicely. I thought they were adjustable, and I liked this system for not building up pressure points on your head. Final thing I'll say is this is a low sensitivity headphone. What I mean by that is it takes quite a bit of power to drive it. So if you're not going to run this off of a phone. Let me say that first. Second, if your amplifier isn't relatively big and gutsy, you may not be able to get the dynamics or the volume you want out of the Susvara. So you're going to have to use a fairly beefy headphone amplifier. For my purposes, in our headphone lab, I have a DCS Lena amplifier. It's got several gain settings, multiple inputs, and is known to be high power, high current delivery kind of amplifier that can handle a wide variety of headphones, which is why we have it as a reference amplifier. So, with that preamble about the nature of these things and why we're talking about them, let's come back in a minute and we'll talk about sound quality, because that's really what we care about, and there's quite a bit to say. Just a brief interruption, esteemed viewers. As you may know, I'm Tom Martin, Chief Content Officer of The Absolute Sound. We have a new product. It's on the Substack platform, and we're going to do some interesting things with Substack. First of which is reader questions and answers. Each Monday, readers will submit questions. We'll pick the most interesting ones and we'll answer the questions on Friday. We'll also have early access to articles and special blogs that don't appear anywhere else. We hope you'll join us. It's only a cost of a cup of coffee per month. Just check on the screen or in the show notes below. Thanks, and now back to the show. I found the sound quality of the HiFiMAN Susvaras to be superb. I don't think the reviewers who have praised this headphone are wrong. I don't mean at the specific detailed level. I mean, we all have quibbles about everything that gets said in reviewer land, but generally speaking, this is a very, very good headphone. I get what people have heard, and I've enjoyed listening to them tremendously. But I think you want and you deserve a little bit more detail in that, so let's go through it. First of all, one of the things that a lot of people listen for, and I think it kind of makes sense, is what can be called top to bottom or octave to octave balance. That means the bass, the mid-range, and the treble, do they occur in reasonably equal amounts so that the musical sounds that a group or a band or an orchestra makes sound kind of like they do in real life. If bass is hugely elevated, it tends to cover up a lot of the lower mid-range and everything sounds a little bit dark and muffled, or can. If treble is too elevated, it can be bright and annoying, and the transients can have too much attack. This is a beautifully balanced headphone if you know what real music sounds like, and, very important point, if you want a headphone that sounds like what real music sounds like. That's how we do our reviews. That's what we use as a reference, the sound of live music or real instruments or real voices. We use that as our reference standard for whether we're getting, the results we would like. It's your choice. It's your life. You may or may not want that. There are reasons to recommend it. Anyway, this does a good job of even octave to octave balance. Furthermore, and I think a very important point is, in some headphones that have good bass, mid-range, treble balance, you really get the sense listening to individual instruments that there are dips and peaks within that, so that the broad frequency response is pretty even, but within the band there are some fluctuations that make individual instruments or voices not sound quite right. I don't hear much of that at all. Bass instruments sound like bass instruments sound. Male voices sound like male voices sound. Female voices sound like female voices sound. Cymbals sound like cymbal sound, violins sound like violin sound, and so on. You get the point. Each of the instruments sounds relatively accurate, and that's a big accomplishment, let me tell you. There are many, many headphones that are relatively balanced at the macro level, but at the micro level, there are quite a few variations. So, chalk that one up as a second advantage of the Susvara. Third thing I liked about the Susvaras is they present instruments with a good degree of detail. That's partially, I think, because there isn't a lot of wavering in the frequency response, but I think it's also because their small signal behavior, that's what it can be called, is pretty good. I'm going to come back to that at the end of this section and talk a little bit more about it. But again, you hear quite a bit of detail and life in the different instruments with these headphones, and that makes it very enjoyable. Dynamics are also excellent. As I said, you need a big amplifier, but once you have a big amplifier, there's really a sense with the Susvaras that you can do delicate sounds that are kind of soft, and you pick up the detail and you pick up that low-level material. But then, when the Stratocasters ring out and, Metric or Death Cab for Cutie is just wailing away, that power pop kind of stuff also comes through well. And the bands that go from soft to loud and soft to loud over and over again, it just tracks that nicely. And the sense of dynamic realism is really good. The dynamic transients aren't overdone. They're not driving spikes through your head. But you really get a sense of aliveness and punch with these that, again, I think makes them quite enjoyable and allows you to get into this place where you very easily stop listening to the sound and just start enjoying the music, which is, really about the highest praise that you can give any piece of audio gear. So, many, many, many good things. Spatial imaging is very dependent with any headphone on the nature of the recording. I did think they did a nice job of having the sound feel like it was coming a little bit from outside of your head rather than from inside of your head. But that's about what I can say there. There's no headphone that I've really heard without a binaural recording that can present the band on a stage like you have with a traditional in-room audio gear. That's not a flaw of the Susvara, by the way. That's just the nature of the way we do recordings and how they're not really usually optimized for headphones. So, let's talk a little bit about whether there are any flies in the ointment of the Susvara's sound quality. The answer is almost no, but not quite. The one thing I really noticed is that each individual instrument sounds like it's got a tiny bit of softness to it. I want to do the politicians on the one hand, on the other hand thing with this. That's probably the side to err on. It pretty much guarantees that, except on very bad recordings, the Susvaras sound natural, and I'll say this, although it isn't exactly what I mean, a little bit analog-y, like that thing that people like about turntables and cartridges and vinyl. It just makes them a teeny bit relaxed in a very enjoyable and beautiful way. But for those of you who are really into retrieving detail and getting the last little bit of the reflections of the orchestra off the walls of the hall and that sort of thing. I don't think these are the last word in low-level signal retrieval and definition. I don't know why, and I could even be wrong, but that's definitely what I heard, and I heard that as kind of a consistent thing from track to track. Again, I think if you had the headphones and you weren't doing what I'm doing, which is comparing them to a huge array of other headphones, I don't even think you might notice it because the sound is quite beautiful and natural sounding, as I said. So I think mostly this feature I'm talking about would not be an annoyance. It would be something you would actually like and enjoy about the headphones, but I don't think they're the last word in resolution. As a point of comparison, the Stax 007s, SR007s, especially with the Blue Hawaii tube amplifier, just they microscopically go down into the noise floor a little bit farther than I thought the Susvaras did. You give up a bunch of other things that the Susvaras do well. So I'm not saying the SR007s are necessarily better, and I don't have them in the lab right now to do the direct comparison, so I don't want to overdo knowledge from memory. But I do think there are headphones above this price level, by the way, that will do a little bit more of that low-level retrieval. Anyway, enough on that, because probably not something you care super a lot about, but for those of you who've been around for a long time and have developed that refined set of tastes, you might notice that. Again, I think it's 60% of strength and 40% of weakness on the same variable, and I think you're going to come out with a big plus in the column on that one. Okay, to summarize, I think the HiFiMAN Susvara is a superb headphone. It's got a good reputation for a good reason. It does almost everything well, and the things it doesn't do perfectly are mainly subtractive errors, which don't get in the way of the music and don't really annoy you very much. They're comfortable. So the main downsides, honestly, are they're expensive, and you need a big, not necessarily expensive, but you need a relatively powerful power amp. I recommend you hear them, and I think you would love them. We'll use them, as I said, as a reference for some of the other headphones we do. So I hope you'll come back for more. Thanks for watching. If you like this, please subscribe to the channel. And you can also, in the show notes, find a link where you can subscribe to our weekly newsletter for free. And you can also subscribe to our magazine, which I think you would quite enjoy. About 100 reviews a year in here of other things, and do a nice job. So we'd love to have you join us. Thank you.